Okay, hello everyone, and we are so glad that you could join us tonight. Tonight we have another one of our live chat sessions. This, by the way, is actually our 10th one that Wild Rise has organized. So happy 10th live chat anniversary, I guess. So, okay, tonight I'm actually very, very honored to have guests from various countries tonight. Yeah, so I'm from Singapore, but we also have on the panel people from the Philippines, from Indonesia, from Thailand, as well as Malaysia. Okay, we are actually the ASEAN 5. So historically, when ASEAN was formed in the year 1967, it comprised of 5 countries, and these are the 5 countries, and it was formed as an anti-communist bloc. So here we go. Yeah. So I do think also sometimes when we talk about Southeast Asian panels, there's a little bit of an oversight in the sense that we don't really include the communist countries. But I think that's something that we should be remedying in future sessions. Okay. Enough of that brief introduction right now. I'm going to introduce all our guests. In fact, I will ask them to do their own introductions. But before that, I want to say that we're going to do a little bit of audio description today for listeners who are hearing impaired. No, not hearing impaired, who are visually impaired. Okay, so let me introduce myself first. My name is Alfian Saad. I am the resident playwright of Wild Rise. I am wearing a dark blue polo t-shirt, and I'm inside my bedroom. Behind me is a shelf. Okay, I'll pass on the introduction to our next guest.
Good evening, everyone. I am Ganan Luarca from the Philippines. I am the artistic director of Tanghalang Ateneo, and I am a teacher in college in Ateneo de Manila University. Right now, I'm wearing a dark blue polo shirt, just like Alfian. I'm inside my room. It's all white. Behind me is a white curtain, and that's it. Good evening to us all.
Thank you, Galan. Yes, we did not coordinate our blue polo tees. That was very purely coincidental. And next up, we have Fashali.
Hi, my name is Fashali from Malaysia. I'm wearing black t-shirt with glasses, and I'm in my office room in my house. At the back, there's a table, white table, and lots of files. My wife's handbag and a dying cactus. Yeah, that's it. And there's a couple of books on the shelf.
Thank you so much, Fashali. Yes, Fashali has got a very busy background behind there, so he's got a lot of description to do. Okay, and next up will be Amita.
Hello, my name is Amita. I'm a theater critic based in Bangkok. I'm also an artistic, a member of the artistic board of BIPAM, or the Bangkok International Performing Arts Meeting, and also a co-creator and co-host of the podcast called Bangkok Offstage. I'm wearing a black cardigan and a black shirt, and behind me is my black chair that I'm sitting in, a framed photo of a white flower, bright red wall, and a bookshelf.
Thank you so much, Amita. Really a fan of your red wall. And the next one, and our final panelist for tonight will be Muhammad Abe.
Good night, everybody. My name is Muhammad Abi. I'm from Indonesia. I reside in Yogyakarta. And now I'm wearing my blue batik shirt. And now I'm in my dining table. It is now been changed to my working station. And behind me is a blue wall. That's all.
Yay! All right, thank you so much, Abe. Indonesia represent with your batik shirt. Yeah, the rest of you know national pride, huh?
No.
In Indonesia. Shame on ya. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, okay. Let's begin by bringing out our slides for tonight. Okay, there we go. This is the title of our forum tonight. Is called Hello Neighbor, Teaching, Touring, and Translating Southeast Asian Theatre. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I just want to start off by introducing everyone to this particular series of anthologies that were produced between the years 1991 and 1994. So it was published by the ASEAN Committee on Culture and Information, yeah, or also known as Koki. And it started out from actually a conference in Manila that was organized in the year 1990. So a group of artists from the region, they met and then they were asking questions like, why are we not knowing more about the plays from one another's countries? And that was 30 years ago. And actually, I think today we are still asking similar questions. On this panel, especially, we're asking the same questions. Yeah. So one thing that came out from that meeting in 1990 was they decided, okay, maybe the issue is that we are not translating enough of our plays for one another. So they came up with this collection. So as you can see there, 91 you had Singapore, and then Philippines, Malaysia. Okay, next slide. We have Indonesia, Thailand, as well as Brunei. Yeah. The Brunei one was interesting for me because in terms of the authors that's represented, all of them had the name Haji in front of them. And Haji is for a person who has gone to Mecca, except for one author. And I felt really bad for him. I was like, everyone else has gone to the Hajj and not you, why not? So he looked really alone on the cover. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Singapore anthology. Yeah, just very briefly. So the editor is Robert Yeo. He himself is a playwright. Yeah. And the interesting thing about Singapore is that even though we are really a tiny country, like maybe 5 to 6 million population, we have 4 official languages, which is English, Malay, Mandarin, and Tamil. Yeah, we have the most number of official languages in Southeast Asia. So I suppose when someone has to anthologize something from Singapore, there is an obligation to try to represent those 4 official languages. Yeah. And that's why you see this spread here in this anthology. There's like how many? 7 plays. The first one, Inchong, is in Malay. After Us and Singapore Bridegroom, both those are in Tamil. Alien, Inside and Outside the Door, as well as The Silly Little Girl in the Funny Old Tree. Wow, such a long title. All these 3 are in Mandarin. And the final one, Emily of Emerald Hill by Stella Kon, is in English. So as you can see, there's an attempt by the editors to represent Singapore's state multiculturalism in the collection. Yeah. One interesting thing is in terms of gender, there is only one female playwright in this collection, and that is Stella Kon, who is the writer Emily of Emerald Hill. Everyone else is male. Okay, so we can discuss a little bit more later, but let's move on to the next one, which is the Philippines. So Gilan, over to you.
Okay, this anthology actually, in my judgment at least, is representative of the more important plays written during the 80s, um, actually under the Marcos dictatorship. Okay, this was the editor is Dr. Nicanor Chongson, who is a well-respected scholar and playwright himself. So the selection, first, the System of Professor Toko is um, a political satire, uh, poking fun at dictatorship through the character of a dictatorial teacher who miseducates his students. Toko actually refers to a giant lizard. Okay, so it's along those it's non-realistic and there's a lot of buffoonery happening. It's a laugh out loud play. And then in contrast, Strands of Grey is heavy drama written by Reneo Villanueva. It's about 4 men who are aging and dying in uh, home for the aged, where old people are left to kind of live out their days. It's a very depressing play. I saw this when I was, I think, 8 years old, and I was bawling. It's one of those plays because of the of what do you call this? Because it's a small play. It's a full length play, but it only has around 6 characters. I think it's sort of thing that communities can stage in small theaters. And the North Diversion Road by Tony Perez. Okay. Tony Perez is for me is, at least in my taste, is the most psychologically sophisticated of the plays here. It's a middle class drama, but it's written in a dreamlike fashion. Although it's still realistic, it features 10 couples who are stuck in their car and they have to, fess up with their marriage problems. And what do you call this? It's but the conceit is it's the 10 couples are played by the same actors, the same pair of actors. This is a tour de force for any pair of actors who will take on the play. And lastly, One Tamban is another overtly political play by Maluha Kob, a legend. Um, I had the honor of actually directing her last play just this year before the COVID lockdown. She declared at least that it was her last. Maluha Kob is the only female playwright in this anthology, and One Tamban is about a street boy who eats cockroaches to make a living, sort of like his carnival, routine. And then a college student who's writing her thesis on social welfare and outreach, something like that, kind of experiences her political awakening as she goes deep into the lives of the urban poor in the capital city of Manila. So these are actually, all of them are political in nature. Well, what isn't political, right? But this is a good representative of drama, of comedy.
Yeah.
Um, so there.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit though, in terms of the languages that they were originally written in. Yeah.
Yeah, all these plays are written in Filipino.
Okay.
So in the Philippines, we have two official languages. It's English and Filipino.
Mm-hmm.
Filipino is actually some would argue that's just Tagalog. Okay, so actually, if there's anything um, in this anthology, perhaps it lacks representation from other Filipino languages. I would be guilty with my own selection later on, but that's that.
Okay. Right. I just have one more question. Are plays written in English in the Philippines?
Yes, there are, especially since well, yes, a lot of plays are written in English, especially since writers are encouraged because of the award giving body, the Palanca Awards has an English category,
Right.
and especially since the theater tradition, well, at least the Western theater tradition starts with American colonization.
Mm,
So a lot of universities
right.
end up forming playwrights who write in English. But recently,
Mm,
it's been in Filipino, especially since the 70s, 80s, when they went against American colonization.
right. Right. So there was a turn towards like the indigenous
Nation.
languages or at least
Yes.
the national language. Okay. Great. Wonderful. Okay. Next slide. We are moving on to Malaysia. Okay. Over to you, Fashali.
Hi, so there's a six titles in these anthologies, uh, and before I go into this, I would like to maybe talk about another anthology that have a similar playwright with the title Protest. Uh, the uh, the playwright that have in the Protest anthologies is Dinsman, Johan Jafar, Hatta Zahan, Nordin Hassan, and not Manasikana and Anu Arai. But these anthologies, the modern Asian playwrights, Asian plays from Malaysia, these are the titles, and most of them are written in the 80s and by what would we consider Malaysian Absidies at that time, because in the 80s there's a movement Malaysian Absidies, which very different from Western Absurdism, because I think this is impact of the national cultural policy, which we have three main agenda. First is Malay culture is the the main
Should form the
cultural,
foundation of the core,
yeah,
right, of
yeah,
culture. Mm-hmm.
yeah. and the second one is any other culture like Chinese, Indian, Arab, or any other culture. We can incorporate that. And the third one is Islam is the foundation of all these things. So
Right.
that's why they are taking the absurdism in a different path. So Nordin Hassan is our national laureate, and yeah, yeah. So I would say that all of them are very absurdist playwrights.
Right. So are they all men, by the way?
Yeah, they are
Okay.
all men, and
Right.
they are written in Malay language, bahasa Malaysia.
In Bahasa Malaysia. Okay. Right. So there's, even though there are various other languages spoken in Malaysia, but this particular anthology does not feature any of those, yeah?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great. All right, yeah, we'll just go through that briefly. Okay, next we're moving on to Indonesia. Let's hear from Abe. Yeah, Abe, you're muted. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Mas Alfian. So this foreplay by four male from Indonesia, or should I say, four Japanese playwright. Although this play are written in Bahasa, all of them, but Putu Wijaya is exception because Putu Wijaya actually from Bali, but he's going to university in Yogyakarta and then he moved to Jakarta. So this all four is what to say is kind of important plays from 70s and 80s in Indonesia, 60s to 80s. But and the editor is Subagio Sastrowardoyo, is also great person in literature in Indonesia. But I think he mostly I think he's more into literature and poem, not into dramatic play. But what I'm confused is this is from 94, but he select the bottomless well from Arifin Senur and not the mods, Kapai Kapai from Arifin Senur, which is until now is considered one of the important play in Indonesian theater history. The bottomless well is like from 64 when he start to write modern play, and the mods is in 1968, 1969, where Arifin already left the style of drama and more into theater. So the mods is considered as one of the cornerstone of Indonesia theater modern history. But in this anthology, I think Subagio more interested into drama. So it explains his selection in this for play. And Nano Riantarno is still active now in Teater Koma and one of also important figure in theater, Indonesian modern theater history. And yeah, Time Bomb is one of his important play, but I think also Teater Koma most important play is Cockroach Opera. I don't know why Subagio always select not the important one for me.
Questions for Mr. Subagio. Yeah. Yes.
And Wow, Wow is one of the important play from Putu Wijaya, and I agree with Subagio with this. And the myth is from the late Heru Sawamurti from Yogyakarta and Teater Gandrik. Yeah, and all of the play is representing what is trend in Indonesia theater at the time, which is to mix the tradition and the modern culture.
Okay, interesting. So would you say that in terms of like the formal aesthetics of these plays, they have this similarity?
Yes.
Okay. They're kind of blending between the modern and the traditional.
Yes.
So, yeah. So certain elements of traditional Indonesian theater, like what, Mas Abe?
Yeah, like Heru Sawamurti is he makes ketoprak with modern theater.
Right. So
ketoprak is theater in Japanese language.
Okay. Right. And it's considered traditional theater, right?
Yeah, but I don't agree with that categorization actually, because
Right.
ketoprak is very modern.
Theater? Okay.
Yeah,
Mm,
for me, ketoprak is very modern because it uses proscenium stage and it
right.
uses screen
Yeah.
for the break. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think it's from colonial era. It's
Right.
some it's a modern theater in a sense.
That's so
Only
interesting. Yeah.
use Japanese language.
Right. Because I think we have the similar issues with Bangsawan Theater, right, Fashali?
Bangsawan theater, yes.
Yeah. That
Yep.
it's considered traditional, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
but some of the scholar say that Bangsawan is transition theater
Okay.
because they
Right.
incorporate the some traditional element in the
Mm,
performance and also modernity
right.
in that. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Right. Because of the certain features from Parsi theater that they've taken on, right?
yeah.
So proscenium arch and yeah. Okay. Great. Uh, next slide. Okay. And here we have Thailand and Amita. Take it away.
Okay, so the first two plays are by the same person, King Wachirawut or Rama VI. And he, often you asked me to check, like, when does he use, his pseudonym or his pen name. The first play, Kan Pet, actually, I don't know why they spell it that way, Kan Pet. Pra Kan Pet is one of the three pen names he uses when he writes a play. So he has so many pen names he uses for different purposes, for different types of writing.
Right.
And this one The Shield was actually written originally in English. He started off writing in English. And it's, I guess at that time, I guess he's considered a pioneer for dialogue play, like Western type dialogue play. So before this, it was more traditional, verse plays and all of that.
Right.
So, and this is very reflective of, roles of women of that time, the modernizing roles of women.
Right.
Praruang is a historical play based on a legend of a king in a Yuttaya period. And, an image of a wise king is still, The Shield I had never heard of. The Praruang was adapted and into like a Western musical 2 years ago.
Okay.
Very big production. Ram the Six plays are still used today by contemporary playwrights who want to adapt his comedies.
Right.
He did a lot of translations, Shakespeare translation, Marivaux, he translates French and English and all of that.
Wow.
So he's
Wow.
extremely prolific, and he also wrote like over 100 plays of his own.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Even though he didn't live long, his reign was only 15. He died in his 40s, but he was very prolific.
Amazing. So he did all of that, and he had time to be a king.
For some reason, but then there was a coup against him, by the way, during.
So it's the king himself who wrote.
Yeah,
Oh.
as far as we know. The Shield, we don't know which year.
Okay.
Like there's some verses from his translation of Merchant in Venice that some people can recite even till today if you study. It's like the rhyme is very beautiful.
Right.
Praruang, Praruang is historical, but also The Shield is about women. Praruang, the editor of this is a woman, so even though none of the playwrights here are women, she always seems to find like, there are strong female characters in this, or it says a lot about the roles of women at a certain time. So Supan Blood or Le Supan Bai Luang Vichit Vatakan. Luang is not his actual name, it's a title for like civil servants who reach a certain rank.
Right. Wow.
And he's a Thai Chinese, very accomplished. He was a diplomat, a politician. He after 1935, when Thailand became a constitutional monarchy, he basically ran. He was the head of Fine Arts Department, and also he controlled the Ministry of Education. So Lue Tsupan was like this play that is about a Yuttaya period, set in a Yuttaya period about Thai prisoner of wars in Myanmar camp. And of
Wow.
course, this is so typical, like Thai and Myanmar. Of course, this has to be included.
It's like
The war
bad
between
blood, right?
Thai, bad blood. But it's funny because in this anthology, they included his note, the playwright's note, saying that he wrote this play because he wants, we always see Myanmar as such this enemy, this horrible people.
Right.
But he wrote this play so that, they can't be all bad. Because there's a love story in here, and the main character is a woman, even though it's a war story.
Right. Okay.
And it was, I listened to a talk by a recent a still living historian, and he said the target was to target women, because this is when women start coming out of the home, start working. Most of the schools at that time were run by women, were managed by women. And so, and since he was also the head of Ministry of Education, he was able to disseminate this and put it in, into the curriculum and everything.
Right.
And it was very much about, building the Thai identity, or the identity of Thai nation. Dear Moon, Pran Boon is again, a very accomplished artist. He was a screenwriter, playwright, composer. And Dear Moon is very popular. It's not, the story itself is, love story that ends well. But he basically changes. It changes in terms of music. All of these are significant in terms of form as well. Praruang is he actually wrote 3 versions, but this version I think is a verse play. Okay. And so Le Supan is also a new form of. Introduce a new form of theater, like singing, drama, and dance.
Right.
And Dear Moon is a completely new thing in music, where it uses, it's called playing sakon, which means international music. But it basically is Thai music still. It still sounds Thai. It doesn't sound like, jazz or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it uses Western instrument and Western characteristics and Western notation, for example.
So interesting. Okay. Yeah. So just for our viewers, just to clarify, actually the first 2 plays, The Shield and Prarang, are written by the same person, right? King Rama VI. Yeah. Only that the first one is written in his pseudonym. Yeah.
Yeah, and in English.
That's right. Yeah. I just have a question. So regarding like musical notations and all that, especially in the last play, is this recorded in the script itself?
I didn't see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So interesting. Like it seems like there are quite a few innovations in some of these plays. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So let's have a little discussion regarding all these anthologies. Yeah. Let's retire the slides for a moment. There we go. Okay. So those anthologies were assembled, put together like 30 years ago. And of course, they reflected the body of work that was available at that point of time. So we're talking about early 90s, right? So of course, ever since then, there's been a lot more plays that's been produced, etc. But looking back at those selections, do you think that there are certain gaps? How critical are you of the way those anthologies were put together? I mean, I'll start with the Singapore one, right? Yeah. So, I mean, this is to be aware. We're not going to be like very presentist about it, meaning that we're going to not impose like modern day values on what the choices that people made in the past. But I would just like to say, for example, that in terms of the selection, in terms of some of the translation, for example, I felt that was a little bit lacking. And I think you need really, really good translators, especially for plays that are not actually written originally in English. Yeah. So, and also I do feel that the translation for theatre is something very, very specialized, but I don't think we have got those specialists in Singapore just yet. Yeah, I don't think we have people who are really professionally trained to do that. So I think they got by with a few translators who were not necessarily theatre makers themselves, and it's kind of showed in some of the translations, because it doesn't flow, it doesn't ring like actual dialogue. For example, those people might be more adept at translating prose, Yeah, so I think it's really quite a skill. So I think that's maybe one criticism of it. Another one might be, I do feel that in some of the selections it was a little bit conservative, and sometimes I think that's got to do, like in the Singapore anthology, the editorial committee. I think some of them were coming from academia. Some of them were also kind of a little bit like the old guard. So I think this is an issue also, especially in vernacular literature in Singapore, especially in like Malay language literature, even Chinese language literature. There's this whole a little bit of turf guarding by the literary elders, who are not kind of like open to what younger writers are writing, and therefore feel a need to kind of protect that turf. So I got a sense that some of this might have been happening in this selection, because once you're put in this position of influence, once you are a sort of gatekeeper or tastemaker, you kind of want to sort of like hold on to that. And also, I think also get in your peers, people whose work sort of like reflect your own. So and of course the acts of anthologizing is not just an artistic one, it is a political one as well, right? So as much as people might want to deny, no, it's just, I'm not putting in my cronies, or it's purely by artistic merit. But I can imagine like anthologizing being acts of exclusion of, let's say, your rivals, exclusions of people who you have literary quarrels with, and all those things, right? Yeah. So I'm not saying the Singapore anthology has that, but I just am trying to like problematize the very act of putting together an anthology.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I was just surprised at that. I wasn't sure what modern means to Thailand or to this, like it was never defined. These were from like there was those that are from pre 1930, pre the revolution, and then some after the revolution.
Yeah.
But why these particular plays? She explained it, of course, in terms of forms and the fact that they're all published.
Yeah.
And they were all popular till whenever, till the publication date. And some of the stories are popular, like Supan Blood is still being remade into soap operas and all of that. And yeah, but at the same time, it's like, what is modern? Also, it's very reflective of how Thailand, like she admits, she's like, most of it is just not written down. A lot of Thai plays, a lot of things are just not written down. We come from a long, tradition of oral tradition and all of that, and we're not very good at archiving and or like keeping plays. When I was just researching this for the plays I want to select myself, I had to ask the artist, can I see your script? Because I need to remind myself. I can't just find it online. And I asked a professor, what do you teach at school for theater program? Do you teach Thai plays? Like, I think one former professor said, Thai plays, not really. You teach a lot of Western plays in the program, and then they might just read on their own the Thai plays. But then another professor said, yes, these are the plays that they read. I collect them myself over the years. So she has to be the one like collecting the plays from the playwrights. And a lot of students sometimes you kind of go, oh, there's this a photocopy shop in this university at this faculty in this university. You can find a lot of translations of these classic plays from the West and some of the plays from so you go to these things to get plays. So that's a really big problem in Thailand. There's no infrastructure. We don't really publish plays. A lot of playwrights don't consider themselves playwrights. Playwriting is not part of the literary scene exactly. A lot of playwrights don't consider themselves, they don't call themselves playwrights. First of all, in Thai, they just call themselves directors. They write plays so that they can direct and put something on. And they don't also consider themselves writers, basically. So there's a huge thing. I was thinking, like we have such problems finding plays, having access to plays, modern plays or contemporary plays in the past, let's say 50 years or, in the past few decades, that I feel like, we have this award called Silapathon Award that are given to contemporary to artists who are mid-career artists.
Right.
So artists from in their 30s till maybe 50s or something like that. And I'm like, oh my God, the best gift for them actually would be to archive or give them money to publish their work.
Yes. Right.
So
So that's really interesting. So there isn't really a culture of like publishing these plays.
No. People self-publish.
Okay.
Or there's collective typescript now, but that has so little money and takes so long. They only publish 4 plays per theme, per book. They just came out with the first one. That took a while. Right. And I asked one of the writers, one of the direct artists that whose play I want to feature today. I was like, have you ever published, your self-published? He's like, oh, it got so big. People want to publish my play, and they say, we want to write this extra essay and that extra essay, and then it never came together. Because it got too big.
Right. Wow. Okay, what about the situation in other countries? I mean, is there, because we're talking about the canon right now, and I guess when we want to talk about canonizing, we have to, I suppose, talk about publication and the curriculum and all that, yeah?
I think in Indonesia, the situation now is not different with what Amita said in Thailand, but in the 60s until 80s, we call it the golden age of Indonesian drama, because a lot of play are written and a lot of publication of the play in the magazines, in the newspaper, and some also in the books. But after that, it's declining, I think, until now. So that's why Indonesia Dramatic Reading Festival, the institution where I work now, is a platform to introduce new plays for Indonesian theater workers. So they doesn't have to dig into plays from 50s or from 60s anymore, because we facilitated new playwrights or new plays to be published, not published, to be performed by the act of reading. But interestingly, Mas Alfian, recently I work with Ibet from Kalabuku, Kalanari Theater.
It's a publisher,
to make a competition for new plays. It's still running now.
Okay.
And in 3 weeks, we had 180 plays coming in from all over Indonesia. So
okay. That's very impressive. Wow.
So a lot of people still write, but they doesn't know how to distribute the play.
Right. I was gonna say that was very impressive, but I suddenly remembered you have 270 million.
Yes.
Oh, you got a massive population. So it really does seem like quite a minority activity after all, playwriting, compared to the whole population. Yeah.
Because we call it playwriting is not included in literature and not included in theater. So it's like
okay. So in between limbo kind of state. Yeah. What about in Malaysia, Fashali?
I think this anthology is only focused on the 80s decade, because I think this is the legacy that Christians left for Malaysian theatre. Even he wrote in the introduction of the book that it shouldn't be read that way. You know, the history of the development of Malaysian theatre cannot be written in the 60s what happened, 70s what happened, and 80s what happened. And when these anthologies came out, it's only focused on the 80s, which is, I think, it's problematic because what you consider modern is not just happening in the 80s, because the modern idea of the modern Malaysia it already started in the 50s in playwriting, you see, and 60s, but it's not. But the play that are written in the 60s, which is, I think, considered modern at that time, did not include in these anthologies. So we couldn't see the development of a modern theatre from Malaysia in this anthology. And also some more 80s is the end of I think it's similar to what happened in Indonesia, because in the 60s to 80s we had like golden era of Malay theatre that time.
Right.
I would consider Malay theatre because all plays are written in Malay, in Bahasa,
Mm,
and only in the 80s when Christians started to form Five Art Center, and then these English playwrights come in, some of them like Ki Tuan Chai,
right.
Yuk Wei Tin, K.S. Maniam, Lee
Hmm.
Jung Fo, and so on. So they just started in the 80s. So
Right.
that's why I think English play, they are wrote by other Malaysian,
Hmm.
uh, they are not Malay, they are not written in Bahasa. It's not
Hmm.
included in that anthologies.
Right. Okay.
And then some more,
Mm,
also in theater in the 60s and to 80s,
yeah.
theater they are considered under this Dewan Bahasa. How to
Yeah.
DBP?
So sort of like the
They,
Language and Literary Council, right?
yes,
In
yeah,
Malaysia.
yeah.
Mm, yeah.
So any drama activity, this is
Mm,
the body that as a they do writing competition. They
right.
publish uh, reviews in their magazine in Bahasa. So that's
Hmm.
not really happen in other languages.
Right. I
So
see.
the focus is
Mm,
more on a Malay reader, Malay
yeah.
audience,
Yeah.
Malay director, Malay playwright. So yeah,
Right. So a lot of state sponsorship and state patronage for
yeah.
works written in Malay. Yeah. Okay. Could I also ask, like, what about the status of drama as a literary form? Is it seen as equal to prose and poetry in Malaysia?
Uh, at that time or now?
Yeah, both eras, if you could
Yeah,
comment.
uh, probably in the 80s,
Mm,
they are considered as literary,
okay.
compared to the like performing arts, or the other. Uh, yeah, and that's why I think most of the play are written with like they are not encouraged to be written in the colloquial language,
Right.
so
Okay.
use proper bahasa.
Yeah.
So if we read it now, it
Yeah.
sounds like very
Formal and
official, like
elevated. And,
yeah,
mm, mm,
so flowery,
right.
something,
Right.
that kind of language.
Mm,
For us, even for me, as I use bahasa every day,
yeah.
I found the language that are written in that era is not
Mm,
really. I feel detached.
right.
Uh,
Right. Quite alienated, right? Because it's
yeah,
just too high
yeah.
flow in the register. Yeah. Okay.
But
Great.
now, sorry,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
But now, there are more plays. Even the playwrights are Malay or using bahasa mainly. They kind of mix the language and have this, rebel attitude. Try to maybe to shaken the use of formal bahasa.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
in the
Right.
play.
Right. So there's more usage of, let's say, colloquial languages in
Yep, agree.
contemporary plays. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Great. And let's hear from Gilan some observations.
Well, as I said earlier, I thought the anthology was, I mean, the only thing I could probably fault the editor, Dr. Chong Son, would be I suppose it lacked representation from the other Filipino languages because there are around, I think, 180 plus languages in the country. But then I think I'll have to be fair because the productivity in dramatic literature is mostly either either in English or in Tagalog and Filipino, mostly written by playwrights who, although they may have come from different parts of the country, are trained in the craft in universities in Manila, maybe, or in or they write for theater companies that are active in Manila, in the capital. So there's that. The anthology obviously shows high concentration. Oh no, my audio is choppy. Okay. The materials obviously reflect the high concentration of the output dramatic output from Manila, from the capital. But one observation that I did have was the selection came from mostly the 80s,
Right.
which was a time where playwrights wrote against as to critique
Marcos. Yeah.
the dictatorship, the
Right.
Marcos dictatorship, right? Uh, because one thing that I don't know if this is the right term for it, but we can credit
Mm-hmm.
those troubled times for um, really
Right.
upping the productivity
Right.
of protest theater,
Mm.
right? And I mean, if I look at the dramatic
Mm-hmm.
literature uh, prior to
Mm-hmm.
the dictatorship, I don't think there's a lot of it because it's still highly influenced by the
Right.
American
Mm.
education, right? And then so it had to wait for
Right. Okay.
oppression, I suppose, for those artistic juices, to get
Mm.
productive.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
after the revolution during the 80s,
Yeah.
when you move up to the 90s, um, I'm not sure if the productivity was still the same. It
Mm.
had to wait, I
Mm.
suppose, for what
Mm.
I can term as perhaps another renaissance, perhaps, of
Right.
original Filipino playwriting, encouraged mostly by the start
Right.
of the Virgin Lab Fest, which is an annual festival that
Mm-hmm.
encourages one
Of
act
new writing,
plays,
right? Yeah.
encourages playwrights
Mm.
to write. Yes. Um, so there.
Mm.
So going back to the anthology, I think it's a fair
Mm-hmm.
representation. Uh,
Okay,
and
great.
so
Thank
there.
you. I mean, I feel like there's a whole panel that's waiting to be done on whether or not repressive regimes foster creativity and whether artistic activity is a lot more valued under conditions of like oppression and authoritarianism. And I think that's a kind of like shared history we have in a lot of Southeast Asian countries. Okay, but I want to move on to the second part of our little panel today, which is where we kind of recommend three plays that we think people in the region should know about, and I've broken it down into three different kind of categories. Yeah, which is um, so different criteria. So the first one is I'm thinking of plays that could be included in the curriculum for people to teach, to learn more about the theater or the country that the theater that the play represents. The second criterion I have is a play that you think could tour the region, and the third one is a play that could be translated and then programmed and performed by that particular country. Yeah. Okay. So these are my selections. A play that I think could be taught around Southeast Asia is Off Center by Haresh Sharma. So this is actually a play that deals with mental illness. And for me, it's interesting because the two lead characters are Singapore minorities, ethnic minorities. So there's a character called Vinod, who's ethnically Indian, and there's Saloma, who's ethnically Malay. So Saloma is schizophrenic, Vinod is manic depressive. They meet um, after they've been at a mental institution or institute of mental health, and then they meet at one of those sort of reintegration parties. And it's a story where when I talked to the playwright, he showed me the plot as being something like this, where can you see the camera? Where it's like this and then like that. Yeah. So two people really get close together, but what happens is they develop this kind of codependency, and the one who's depressive actually gets worse in the process. So it's quite tragic. But I think it really does reveal a certain side of Singapore that people don't see, which is really a, a very stressful society where people are sometimes quite in denial about the kinds of toll that it takes on mental health. Yeah, and this pressure to always succeed. I think Singapore can be seen as quite an unforgiving society, and what I mean is unforgiving of failure. And in many ways, I think that the play does demonstrate that. Yeah. Okay, a play that I think could go on tour is Emily of Emerald Hill. So this is a one-woman show, and it's really such a gift to an actor because you're basically playing this character from between the ages of 15 to 50, or even in the 60s. Yeah. And then you see an entire life story unfold in front of you. And in addition to that, you also see a certain part of Singapore's history that maybe not a lot of people are very aware of. And you see like pre-war history and then post-war, and you see the life and the culture of a particular community in Singapore known as the Chinese Peranakan community. So this word Peranakan comes from the word anak, root word. The Filipinos will know what I'm talking about. So anak is child, right? So Peranakan is, I suppose, of descent. So a Chinese Peranakan is someone of Chinese descent, but this is a culture where there's been some acculturation or syncretism or fusion. So there are features of both Chinese and Malay culture. You can say that Chinese Peranakan culture is something like Sino-Malay culture. Yeah. In Singapore currently, it is at risk of fading. So this play has got that kind of significance because it preserves the intangible culture of the Peranakans, yeah, in a play. So you see the Peranakans at their heydays during the colonial period, because they were also known as the King's Chinese. A lot of them spoke English. A lot of them went to mission schools, etc. Were English educated, were very favored by the British colonial administration. And then you can see post-war how their fortunes decline, yeah, because of different changes in Singapore society, especially after the departure of the British. So that's Emily Emerald Hill. Okay, and the last one I feel that could be interesting to be translated into Thai or Indonesian or Bahasa Malaysia is Everything But the Brain by Jean Tay. So this is a story which is a relationship between a woman who's a teacher and then her father who's a math genius, yeah, and a physics genius. But then he suffers from a stroke, and there's this idea of racing against time. There's this idea of looking at different theories of time, and maybe even turning back time, or traveling through time to make sure that this kind of like degeneration, to try to prevent this degeneration from happening. And it's very theatrical because you have an ensemble composed of three bears, because the father once told the daughter a story involving three bears to try to explain a certain concept of physics. So these are my three selections. Next slide, please. And I just want to share some images from those. So you see off center in the top left. So there's two main characters, two people who meet at the Mental Health Institute. On the right side of that, you have Ivan Heng, who is from Wild Rice, playing Emily or Emerald Hill. So the role was written for a female actor. But what Ivan is doing is he's tapping into this tradition of what is known as Wayang Peranakan, which is a form of Peranakan theatre where actually men would play the female roles. Yeah. My choice by tour is also because it's a one-person show. It's very mobile. And lastly, there's an image from Everything But the Brain, and you can see the father in the middle, and you can see that from the posture of his hand, he's actually suffered from a stroke. Okay, so that's my offerings of Singapore to the world and the region. Okay, so let's hear what would be your selections for the Philippines. Who are the playwrights we should know about?
Okay, before I start, I just want to say how cruel this exercise is, because it's really choosing from a great list of playwrights that all deserve to be part of this. Anyway, enough of that. Let me just fess up to this choice. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So for me, the best a good play to teach in the area is okay, just to clarify, the title of this play in Filipino is Bon at Baril, it's a E flat major. But here you see it in an English translation. That's by me, because I don't think, I might be wrong, but I'm not aware if the play has already been translated in English. So it's Moon and Gun in E flat major by Chris Miliado. Okay. The play briefly is written 1985. It's a vignette of scenes that are either dialogues or monologues, and they're all about the Marcos dictatorship. Okay. I thought that it would be a great opportunity. It's a fantasy of mine to have like our neighbor countries teach in their classrooms a bit of this history, especially coming from the fact that just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, our current president had the corpse, the cadaver of Marcos, the dictator, buried in our
Hero cemetery.
what do you call this, in the Libingan ng Bayan, the Hero Cemetery, yeah, against the will of the people, actually. So that is just part and parcel of this whole movement of historical revisionism. They've been sort of very 1984-esque,
Mm,
erasing the bit of that history, just because the Marcos dictatorship is an ally. The
right.
relatives are ally of the present dispensation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fantasy of mine for neighbor countries to sort of discuss, to have to discuss in their classrooms, that bit of history.
Right.
So while at home we're all denying it, our neighbors are doing the work for us of remembering
Right.
historical reckoning.
Mm,
Um, to tour the play to tour here, I cheated a little, and I was
yeah,
I was
you did.
kind of begging
I
Alfian to
said
allow me
one.
to teach at the cheat.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Okay, so instead I chose three one-act plays because I thought if we're gonna tour them, putting them together will comprise a full-length thing, right? Um,
Right.
these three plays are all written by Layeta Bukoy. Doc
Mm-hmm.
Resurrection Will Heal the Nation, Doc Resurrection Gagamutin ng Bayan, Elias Inocentes, The Innocent Ones, and Las Mentiras de Gloria, The Lies of Gloria. They haven't been translated in English, if I'm not mistaken, so these are my suggested translations, I suppose. Um,
Right.
Layeta Bukoy, at least personally, marks for me a turning point. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think I'll declare that. Marks a
Wow.
turning point in Philippine playwriting in Filipino, in as much as she kind of epitomizes the contemporary mode of playwriting
Mm-hmm.
that's championed by, as I mentioned, the Virgin Lab Fest. So these are all entries in the Virgin Lab Fest, that festival of one act play.
Ah, right.
Um, and each one act play features a highly controversial and quite shocking
Mm-hmm.
dramaturgy. Doc Resurrection is about features it's set in the province. A doctor plans to run for the gubernatorial seat, I think.
Yeah.
But the opposition, and he wants to change the government, the local government, how things are run.
Yeah.
But opposing him is his own cousin,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
who is actually a nobody, a bum, but was
yeah.
hired by the administration to go against this messiah.
Mm.
And it ends in brutal murder, and it's
You
dark
just
comedy,
spoiled it for us.
hilarious as hell, very irreverent.
Okay.
Yeah, to encourage producers to tour this around.
Right.
The Innocent
Yep.
Ones, El Inocentes, it's the last two plays, The Innocent Ones and The Lies of Gloria, Las Mentiras of
Yep.
Gloria, are both incest plays. Okay.
What?
Elias Inocentes, yes. Elias Inocentes is about two sisters. Both of them are age 8 and 10, or I might get that the age is wrong. But the
Mm-hmm.
setting of the play is in two rooms separated by a thin wooden wall. It's in the urban poor area.
Right.
And it just shows how they cope with abuse and domestic
Mm-hmm.
strife
Mm-hmm.
by exploration of their bodies in a sexual manner.
Right. Right.
And
Mm,
there's an unconscious incest that happens between the two, but instead of being sensationalized, it's
right.
not out of sexual desire, but really like a
Mm,
survival,
right. Right.
a
Right.
method to survive, you know
Wow.
poverty. And
Right.
lastly, The Lies of Gloria
Mm-hmm.
is terribly shocking because it's about a man
Mm-hmm.
who actually had an incestuous relationship with his sister, who recently died of breast cancer. And the
Wow.
play is a dialogue between the two where the sister is a ghost. And
Wow. Okay.
we find
Mm,
out, and I don't want to spoil it this time, but by the end, the last tableau of the play is with the ghost's breasts gushing with blood.
Oh my
It's
god.
Antona Arto, it's theater of cruelty, and I love it.
Wow.
And I think it's the kind of the pushing of the envelope that is championed by Virgin Lab Fest, and it's a
Right.
sampler of where it reminds me of the in your face movement in
Right.
London.
Right. Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's a sampler of this modern, or should I say postmodern
Yeah.
sensibilities in playwriting.
Mm.
And
I thought it
lastly,
was
the oldest
interesting.
play
Yeah.
in my selection, 1981. Yes, go ahead, Afian.
No, just now when you said, oh, the other two plays are incest plays, and you said it so casually, I thought like it was a genre of plays. Like, oh, it's an incest play. We have so many of those. Like, it's a genre here. Everyone writes one.
Well, maybe because I'm a regular audience member, or
Right.
sometimes I write for the Virgin Lab Fest. Incest plays are kind of a usual fare in the Virgin Lab
I
Fest.
see. Right. Okay, the next one. Yeah, reason has its reason.
Yeah, so this last one, Reason Has Its Reason, May Katwiran ng Katwiran by Rolando Tino. Rolando Tino is a well-respected playwright. He's dead, but he's
Yeah.
considered one of our national artists.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the thing about the reason why I wrote this, I included this in my list was because it translates well, because
Okay.
it's not very context heavy. In fact, the
Right.
reason behind that is the setup is actually Brecht. It's Brechtian theater, so it's really more about social dialectics. It's about the relationship of a master and his servant, and how the servant is repeatedly oppressed, abused, but
Mm,
does not flinch against his master, because his master is able to reason out, very
mm,
naturalistic, um, sort of social
mm.
Darwinian arguments. And in the
Right.
end, we laugh at the situation, like classic Brecht, right? We laugh and critique
Mm-hmm.
the situation, because it's all hilarious. They burst into random moments of song and
Mm-hmm.
dance in the middle of the jungle. It's really out there. And I suppose it will translate well, because it doesn't belong to a context, but it does comment
Right.
on issues, universal issues of social injustice, oppression, social
Mm,
class, etc.
right.
And recently, it
Yep.
was translated by Dr. Ricardo Abad.
Mm-hmm.
Reason Has Its, who is an, I suppose, student of Tino also,
Right.
and it stages very well. So this is my
It's
selection.
great. Yeah. So let's look at some of those pictures then.
Yes.
Ah.
So the left is a gun and sorry, Moon and Gun in E flat
Mhm.
major. That's a very recent production. Man, when
Right.
I saw that production, the thing is, it might seem like we're stuck in the Marcos era,
Wow.
problems, but we actually are, because the
Mm,
problems are recurring. After the revolution, just to
mm,
see things go back to that dark age, it's really depressing. So more of these plays have
right.
started coming up. Um,
Mm,
we kind of revitalized that mode of theater making. That was a great production of it. I think that
mm.
was 2017.
Yeah.
And then the right is Doc Resurrection. I chose just one
Mhm.
picture out of the three.
Yeah.
Um, and then below is the English translation, the staged English translation of May Katwiran ng Katwiran. Those are all
Mm-hmm.
college kids. It's a
Oh.
lovely play, also for college kids, because you know they don't
Yeah.
have to play the right age, and
Right.
it's got a lot of song and dance and dialectic. So there.
Interesting. Okay. Lovely. So that was the one that's influenced by Brecht, huh? Reason has
Heavily,
its
heavily
reason.
influenced by.
Ah,
Yes.
okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, and now I'm so curious about a lot of these plays now. Okay, but let's move on to Malaysia and Fashali. Let's look at your three recommendations.
Okay, okay. For now one, that a play that should be taught in syllabus is, I think, Baling, from Makte. Baling is actually a device performance. And Makte also, he consider himself not a playwright, but performance maker. So I think this play is, I think you can consider it as a post dramatic theater, because it's not usually, it doesn't have the tradition of playwriting in Malaysia, if you can see the history. So for it's, I think it's a very good teaching material, so that we can see how first in the theater itself or drama itself, so how a performance are created in the early modern era is from written text to then device work, which use available script from Baling Talk. So Baling is a documentary theater based on Baling Talk, which is happened in the 1959, I think, between the Communist Party leader Chimpeng and also the Malaysian government at the time, Tunku Abdul Rahman and some of the
like David Marshall
English,
from Singapore also. Mm.
Yeah, David Marshall. So they have this talk between this Communist Party to surrender, and then they use this available script, this available.
It's the transcript, right? Transcript of the dialogues.
Yeah, transcript. Yeah, transcript, and then they perform it. So it starts. I think it started in 2002 or 3 when they first just have a reading of the transcript, full reading, and then it moves to make a performance based from the transcript, and then I think in 2017 or something, I think they have like solid form of this performance. So it offers the alternative history of Malaysia. It's not history that you can read from the history textbook, school book. And it's a lot of research, interview, digging into the old archive and stuff.
Because in official history, the communists are usually seen as villains, right?
Yeah. So yeah, in the school textbook. So I think in the Southeast Asian, so we consider communists as like a villain, but at this, they invite us to look at it from different perspective, to look at it as a not looking at the as a villain, but two political party that collide together and have
contesting
different
for power.
Yeah, so that's number one, Baling. I think it's we can learn how to create a performance and also nation building,
history.
Both. And then number two, play that should go on tour is Atomic Jaya by Jose Sulaiman. It was written in 1998 and it was performed first in March, I think, in 1998, same year. It was written for one performer, but it has a lot of character, and I think in several version of restaging in Singapore and also Malaysia, they have incorporated 2 or 3 performers in that. But the first performance was performed by Joko Katas. So the story is centered from a PhD graduate, overseas graduate, Mary Yuan. They are asked by the government to build like atomic bomb. So, but there's it's a very style play, and it's portray like very ambitious Malaysia at that time, because in the 90s, a lot of country, Malaysia are considered Asian tiger at the time in the 90s decade. So it's portrayed in this play that Malaysia is so ambitious. And also in that year also we have hosted Commonwealth game. A lot of national development, information technology, computer, and a lot of building in those decades.
So it was the era of the mega projects, and it made sense to like also initiate a nuclear program as part of this whole ambition, right? Okay, what about the place that you want to translate?
This is, I think, very contemporary. It was I think the first they have three series,
Yep.
which consists 13 playlets,
Right.
all written by Ridwan Saidi. And Ridwan Saidi is not a theater graduates or have theater background. He
Right.
has architecture. He studied architecture and involved and start making theater just very recent year, 4 to 5 years. It's very shocking
Yep.
display, and it's offer new idea of Malay play
Mm.
at the time,
Mhm.
Malay
Right.
bahasa, because we don't see quite shocking theme
Six.
issues, character discussion that
Right.
Ridwan has offered in those playlists. So I
Mm.
think this play should
Mm.
be travel, and you can see that
Interesting.
this playlet also have the sense of rojakness.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
so
for translation, rojak is like a kind of salad where we put in a lot of ingredients, so it means something that's a mixture, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you have
For
a
the
lot of,
Thais and the Filipinos, rojak. Yeah. Okay.
so we
Okay. So
can
let's look at
yeah,
the
so we can
photos.
have taste of each.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. So 13 different playlists. Just to give you an example, on one of the playlists, you have two Malay characters, and you realize that they're on a porno shoot. Right. So that's why this is kind of like a little bit shocking or taboo to mainstream Malaysian audiences. Okay. So just the photos there. Let me just go through this very quickly. Baling top left. So you can see documentary theatre. Those are transcripts from the Baling talks. On the right side, you have Atomic Jaya. And then right below there, one of the playlists from Ridwan Saidi's Theatre Modular. Okay,
yeah.
let's move on to Abe for Indonesia. Your three selections.
Thank you, Mas Alfian. Before I start, I'm happy that I translate Layata Bukai play Rock Resurrection to Bahasa for Indonesia Dramatic Reading Festival in 2010. And
Wow.
also, Indonesia Dramatic Reading Festival have a feature play from Huzir Sulaiman, and also last year we have Cinta and Ridwan Saidi for Asia Press meeting. So yeah, I'm quite happy to hear the
That's great.
choices now.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, this is difficult task to do, Mas Alfian, to choose three from all the play from Indonesia, but I try to be fair to my selection. So for teach, I select Growths on the dining table from Hafiz Alma. This is the oldest play I select. This is from 1988. Hafiz Alma is uh, more known as a poet in Indonesia, but he is central for one of the uh, theater movement that changed Indonesian theater scene in 1980s and 1990s. He worked with Theater Sai at the time to introduce what we call now in Indonesia as a physical theater. So, clothes on the dining table, it's different with the play written before because it's not like a conventional drama. The characters are uh, a man and his wife, if I'm not mistaken, and the
And a
property.
table.
Yeah, the table, the property in their house.
Okay.
So they talk,
Right.
and it's talk about the technology and urbanization at the time. So it's a different theme with the book selection, the anthology we discussed before, because Afri Salmana uh, not talking about the mix between traditional culture and the modern culture anymore, but he talks more into urbanization in Jakarta. Uh, so this is if you want to know the situation in urban Indonesia in
Mm.
1980s and 1990s, how
Mm-hmm.
people surprised with the iron,
Right.
the electric iron,
Yeah.
not the gas iron. So Hafiz
Mm.
Almana play is representation of that,
Right.
and
So
it's
it's a society in transition. Mm.
yeah, a lot of
Mm.
metaphors and poetic language,
Right.
and it's a physical theater. So the written play,
Mm-hmm.
and the performance are very different.
Right.
Yeah,
Mm.
and the second one,
Yeah.
is the Makassar trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
This is the youngest play I select.
Right.
This is Sinta Febriani, a
Mm-hmm.
woman from Makassar, which is in Sulawesi, not from Java, because I think we must select someone from outside of Java.
Yes, get out of your island. Yes.
Sinta is a playwright and theater director and a poet also. And this is interesting for me, the Makassar trilogy. It consists of three short play that she devised from the archive of Makassar city. So Makassar is like big city in Sulawesi, in South Sulawesi. And this specifically talk about the change in the urban landscape of Makassar. So Makassar trilogy is like a sad love story to her city, to Makassar, because the change that happened and the effect of the change to the people, like the rise of the suicide number of the people
Right.
and the
Right.
number of the people that enter the mental health hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And the change in display, Sinta framed that happened because of a lot of development of the city and the
Right.
change.
Mm.
The city transformed from a beach to
Yep.
a industrial area.
Right. Mm.
So yeah, I think
Okay.
it's very
Right.
beautiful sad love story to her
Right.
city. And the last one, of
Mm.
course,
Mm.
Picnic from
Yep.
Janet Moko,
Mm-hmm.
which is from Java, but is
Yeah.
now away. This is from 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Makassar Trilogy is from 2017. So
Right.
Picnic is from 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting because mostly Indonesian play are not set in a hotel lobby. But
Right. Okay.
Picnic
Yep.
select this hotel lobby as the set, and
Mm-hmm.
also this is I think one of the not many play in Indonesia that talk about LGBT issues in more
Ah.
subtle way. So this is also important to
Right.
note.
Mm.
Uh, so Jonet is one of the
Mm.
playwrights that advocating this issue, and also
Right.
issue of openness and how to say, to talk about the taboos in
Mm.
Indonesia.
Mm. Right.
So
Mm.
yeah, I think and this is set in Bali also, who is everybody in Southeast Asia know Bali
Right. Right.
more than know Indonesia maybe. So I
Right.
think this
Yeah.
is good to be translated to other language because everybody knows Bali, right?
Yes. Bali is like shorthand for the whole of Indonesia. Shall we take a look at some of the photos for
Sure,
those?
sure.
Okay,
So you
there we
can
go.
see,
Mm.
yeah, it's a
Mm.
growth from the dining table. So
So the
it's
growth
very
is a woman. Is it?
no, I think the cast is changed. Change
Okay.
the
Okay.
so it's a double casting, more triple. Yeah, they can change the character
Right.
anytime.
Right.
And the red one is the Makassar
Makassar.
trilogy. This is
Mm-hmm.
the last part.
Yep.
Give me back the old beats we have, something like that.
Right. So this is a sunset at the
And
beach. Mm-hmm.
yes, and you can see the excavator in the beach.
Right.
Yeah, and the one in the bottom is Picnic reading
Picnic.
in Indonesia Dramatic Reading Festival.
Right.
I don't
Oh,
think Picnic have been performed in the States before. It's only in
okay.
reading. Yes.
Right.
So it's good
Okay.
to be
Okay.
translated. Maybe someone from
Yeah,
Malaysia
we'll
or
have a
maybe.
full production.
Sure.
Yeah, in the region. Okay. And finally, let's take a look at Amita's selection of the plays from Thailand. Amita, I think you're on mute. Yeah, there we go.
Sorry. Mine are pretty young plays. The first one was originally performed in 2011, and the latest version of it was from 2018. And it's by Pradit Prasad Thong from Anatta Theatre Troupe. Pradit is very known for, in Thailand at least, for and maybe a bit in the region for his work with traditional folk forms that are popular in the region itself, like Likke, and also in Thailand. And The Return of One Tong is actually from a very old story that dates back to the 1600, and there are folk versions of it, like fragment, like from the folk versions and the court version. And actually the story is still very popular. If you mention some of the characters, if certain kind of men are called Kun Chang, which is one of the main characters, certain kind of men are Kun Pan, like something like that. And it's basically about these two friends from birth. One is beautiful, a beautiful man, very promiscuous, but also and poor, versus an ugly fat man who's very rich.
God is fair.
And Wan Tong is the woman that's Wan Tong is a woman they've been fighting over for a long time, and in the end, Wan Tong had to decide because first she became the wife of Kun Pan, and then because he went to war and all that, and Kun Chang lured her to become his wife, and and all of that. So she went back and forth between two men as husbands, and in the end, Kun Chang was like, "She's actually my wife." So he asked the king to decide. It's set during a Yutea period to decide, and Wan Tong couldn't decide, so she was sentenced to death. And she came back and became a ghost. And in this version, I think this is something you study in school, definitely the story in many versions, and I'm sure the court version. And this one is focused on Wan Tong as a ghost and her son. So it's a bit of feminist reading, but it has a very subtle challenging of authority, challenging of the king, challenge of the king. But a lot of Bridget's work is like that. I think some people only give him credit for political works that are political, that are overtly political, because they're about certain political figures in Thailand. But actually, a lot of his folk, I think what he does is contemporary folk theater in Thailand, which bringing back the old folk style, but also the purpose of it, which is to make fun of authority. And a lot of the things is like, one time I was looking at one of his plays, and I was like, oh, this is so actually quite radical, but I'm not sure everyone realizes it. I'm sure like I missed a lot of it. Or no, it's not necessarily coded. It's funny. It's so accessible because it's folk drama. And it's super funny, like people were laughing all the time because the jokes were so dirty and, and all of that. But it's like, oh my God, we're actually seeing characters that are kings and queens that are being made fun of. Usually that's not what you see in Thailand, like in Ramayana and everything. Those are the wise kings, the good king. But these are like silly kings. They're stupid, they're silly, they don't know what to do, their servants are smarter, that kind of thing. And his character here, the king doesn't, in the Return of One Tong, the king doesn't appear at all. But of course, his decision and what he decided to do with her, what he condemned her to, even in death, was challenged, was questioned. And in verse form, it's he took from different versions and then wrote parts of his own. So it's in poetry form. There's some traditional singings, and I think this might be a dying art that a lot of not all playwrights know how to write form poetry, and I think his work needs to be studied. And it would be interesting to compare that his version to the court version. Bang Lamod is very recent. It first was staged in 2000. Bang Lamod was by Onanong Thai Si Wong of the B-Floor Theater. It's a physical theater troupe whose work are mostly political, very political. Bang Lamod means area of violation. And it was first staged in 2012. And that went without incident. And it's about about censorship and what we can say and cannot say about the monarchy and sacred institutions. And it was also, I think it coincided, it was soon, not long after the whole problem with the crackdown on the red shirt protesters in 2010, right? 2010, 2011. And that went with that. And I always thought it was such a great script. it's also
Yep.
mixed with physical theater. She plays herself. She tells her personal story of what she wants to do with the play and why she can't do it. So it was I think one of the first plays that very openly talks about censorship and what kind of censorship. And it's also very, very funny. And then in 2015, when it was restaged, this was already, after the coup, after the most recent coup. And somebody, I guess, reported on them somehow because they got a call from authority and they were like, do you have permission to stage this play? Which we never had to do.
Right.
And then, so basically, during every performance, there was a presence of the military who was filming the show as well. And she basically changed the entire introduction into what happened to her. So with the military presence in the performance each night, she was still telling the story of what they were doing to her every night. So it was amazing. And the thing was,
it's almost like meta theatrical. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing was, it's also included in collective Thai scripts, micropolitics collection. And during the launch, I think James Laver, one of the actors, and one of the translators, he performed an excerpt from this, and I was like, this is so interesting. So if it tours, I want it to be played by someone else. I don't want it like
wow. Okay, right.
I would like to see her as a character. I want to see Anna Nong as a character rather than herself. And I'm always fascinated by what if something was kind of there was attempted censorship of this play. How does it play in other countries? Like, is it as but I'm interested in the fictionality of it when she becomes a character rather than she's playing herself.
Right. What is
and White Pearl, I'm interested in. I've never seen White Pearl because it has never played in Thailand, and that's why I'm interested in. Because Anshuli Felicia King she's based in New York. She's of Thai and Australian descent. I'm not even sure she's ever lived in Thailand, and the play is in English.
Yeah,
and it had its world premiere at the Royal Court in London, and it was directed by Nana Dakin of B Floor Theatre, who used to work for B Floor, but now they basically met in Columbia University during their master's degree and their master's program. You seen
I think I've seen this play. I've seen this stage production. Yes, in London.
Oh, okay.
Cool. The Royal Court. Yeah. Did you like it?
It's about skin whitening, right?
Sure.
It's about a beauty company.
An ad that went viral because
the location
is so
is in Singapore, actually.
That's right. It's set in Singapore.
Yeah,
so
it's
this
set
is
in Singapore. And there are characters from Thailand, Singapore, and a bunch of
in Korea
Asian
and Japan.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's written in English. And I remember I've only read this play, and I asked her, what do you think about translating this play into other languages? Because these characters can only speak to each other in English. So, but she was like, "Oh, it'll be interesting to. I think it would have to be adapted, and not just like if it's ever translated into local languages." But I think it also adds a question: is it a Thai play? Is it a Southeast? Is it an Asian play? Is it what play is it? You know?
Yeah.
So
interesting. Shall we take a look at some of those photos? Yeah. There we go. So that's Return of...
the Return of Wonton was interesting about... I think it also shows... I think he's dismissed a lot because of the aesthetics feel so old. Like, because of traditional... I think a lot of critics in Thailand, they see something traditional, they kind of go, no, that's not my thing. Bye.
Yeah.
There's such a divide. We live in such two different worlds when it comes to traditional theater. And I think it gets dismissed when it comes to that kind of thing. So yeah. And the second one on the right, top one, is of course Anna Nong. This is the first production. In the second production, do you see the razor blades, right? The razor blades were full, like it was full. The ceiling was full of razor blade. And at one point, she stood up on a chair and put her head into the sea of razor blade.
Right.
And,
wow. That's almost like a very visceral expression of what censorship is like, yeah?
And it's such... and it has to do a lot with the body because of what she does with the body, the way you can only see parts of the body and everything. So it'll be interesting to see it embodied in a different body as well. in the first one, she also was recovering from an injury, from a knee injury. So it was also part of how her body is limited in itself.
Right.
When she moved.
Right.
And the last one is called White Pearl. I think that's the Royal Court production.
That's Singapore. That's the set of Singapore. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I just want to pull out a few like comments that we had from viewers as we are having this discussion. Jeffrey Tan says, "Thank you for organizing this, Ofin and Wild Rice." There we go. Oh, by the way, on the banner, you will see a few things. People are pitching some of their stuff and projects. So States of Crisis, as you can see, Abe there, is a play collection. You can order it on Instagram, idrf.2019. Yeah. Okay. Vernon says that this is such an important webinar for the region. Thank you, Officer and Wild Rice. And Nabila had a little comment there where she says, people love to set dystopian shows in Singapore. So in addition to White Pearl, I guess we're also talking about Westworld, Disneyland, the death penalty, right? That's why they call Singapore. Okay. All right. So there are other things scrolling there. This is what Amrita.
Yes, Project Save Arctic Equator. I love this platform. I think it's important it's a platform that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure a lot of artists and other people in other countries as well, because it's if you don't know, it's like a digital media platform about that's Singapore based, about the arts in the region. And they're facing some financial crisis right now, and so if you want, you can donate to them. If you can, please donate to them and help save them.
Okay, some of the comments. Gian Palaruan says, "Thank you so much. There's nothing like Southeast Asian culture, and we need the theatre to tell these stories. Thank you for this." Nabila says, "I've been trying to decolonize how to teach playwriting, and students love Banglamet." Yeah. So, the very fact that it's published, right, I think is very important in how these plays circulate in the region. Walid says, "I hope that more books will be published. However, it's difficult to sell it in Malaysia." He says it's difficult. Nabila says, "Thank you, Amita, for mentioning Arts Equator." Walid said just now, he says the scripts are difficult to sell. And actually, this is very common. A lot of booksellers will say, even compared to like poetry or fiction, the plays are often the slowest to move off the shelves. Yeah.
But you guys publish them regularly.
We do.
Right?
Yes, in Singapore we do have quite a lot of play collections already. Yeah, but it is true they don't really sell as well as the rest, because I think there's this impression that a play is not really meant to be read, is a blueprint for a performance. So if you're reading it, you're sort of like not getting the full experience. Yeah. Okay. Someone has asked, where do we proceed from here? Next steps. Oh, good question. Okay, we've had quite a full 90 minutes today. But, if I can just throw this out, maybe this might be the final thing we can tackle, because I would say this video is going to be archived on Facebook. Yeah. So anyone who's interested in the very rich, I believe, playwriting theater culture of Southeast Asia, we have 15 plays tonight that we've discussed. Yeah. As in suggestions from all of you. And I think that could really form the seed of something. It could be a reading group, a book club. It could be something that people could just, try to locate and have their own mini festival. Yeah. But I thank you so much for all your recommendations. Now I'm really, really curious about so many of those. And I'm also glad to hear that some of these plays are already in circulation. So Banglamet is being taught at the Indonesian Dramatic Reading Festival. Mas Abe, you've had readings of various plays, Philippines, and there you go. And this is an anthology, yeah, of all those various plays. Okay, but that question, good question. Where do we proceed from here? What do we do now that we've got all this material and this knowledge? I think we are baby steps towards getting a sense of, what plays are available. What do you think we should do? Anthology?
It's important. Anthology, and some of the I read Micropolitics from
Yep.
Thailand, and I also
Yes.
heard from IDRF initiative, and some of our playwrights also attended to that festival. I think we already started this kind of networking
Mhm.
already, but of course now is, I think this is the extension of the networking and
Yep.
discussion, and hopefully after this a lot of now I know play
Yep.
from Philippine, and maybe I can start digging it to see and
Mhm.
watch Banglama or whatever, and and try to discuss with our own community here in Malaysia. And I think
Yes.
that's what
Yeah. I
next
think one of the
for me.
concretes what's next for a lot of us is that if anyone is going to ask us, hey, how can I find out about Southeast Asian plays? We'll just give them the link to this panel to start with. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, 15 different plays, yo. I mean, that's a starter for your research. Yeah. Gilan, yeah, something.
I'd like, yeah, I'd like to add that
Yeah.
ever since I met you guys in BIPAM, just last year, I've conceived of a possible season for our theater company, and I think it'll be good because we're
Right.
dealing with student
Yeah.
actors, right, and student theater artists, to introduce
Mm,
them to Southeast Asian playwrights. So maybe in 2 to 3 years, I'm planning a whole season on perhaps some of
wonderful.
the plays that were mentioned here. So I hope that in 2 to 3 years we see each
Yes.
other, you know,
Not
and
yeah.
Keep
then
healthy, Gelan. Keep healthy.
Yeah. So
yes,
So Ade
survive
already
the
has a
pandemic.
platform in the form of the Indonesian Dramatic Reading Festival, which is centered in Yogyakarta, and they have had readings of Southeast Asian plays already. Yeah. For me, my company Wild Rice, we are really keen on starting a Southeast Asian theater festival as well. So that would be another platform. Amita, you're on the committee for
Yeah.
BIPAM, right? Yeah.
Yes, and we are trying to, get to know everyone better. Oh yeah, we now have Under the Sea
That's right. Yes.
plug.
Yes. Fix that. Yep. Yep.
Under the Sea program, which we're talking to all 11 in the Southeast Asia, all 11 countries in the Southeast Asian
Yeah.
region, and so this week is Brunei. This Saturday is Brunei, and I think next step could be like I was thinking the other day. I was like Cliff Notes because I was trying to find some information like quickly online because I don't have access to books about certain characters. I was like, how
Right.
about not just? I was like, no. Cliff Notes is sacrilegious. This is like, I can't believe I'm suggesting this as a literature student, but actually a database
Okay.
of
Right.
plays in Southeast Asia, maybe in English and local language, where we can access, information on the most significant productions of a play, and also characters, name of characters at least. And
Right.
this is what I always have problems with, and maybe a
Right.
quick synopsis,
Right.
and something like that. I think that would be great.
Yeah, I think some. I think the information is out there, but I
Right.
guess a lot of it is scattered. For example, I know
Yeah,
some theater
exactly.
companies have put their archives online. So the necessary stage, which created the work off center. There's
Yeah.
a whole website where you can access all your videos and everything. But as you said, it's not consolidated, right? So
Yeah.
might be quite nice to get that initiative done. All right. This has been a really lovely talk. I've learned so much from all of you, and I'm really excited now to get hold of all the plays that you've mentioned. Yeah, I felt like wow, this has been quite a class. If this was a class, I'd sign up for all the modules. Thank you for sharing all
Thank
your
you.
wonderful suggestions today. Thank you also for being such lovely teachers as well. And yes, Southeast Asia. I think it's definitely a work in progress in terms of like cultural integration, right? I think economic integration. I think a lot of our government leaders are working on it, working very hard on that. But in terms of like really knowing one another, I definitely believe a lot more can be done. And I think theater is one of those spaces in which all these exchanges can happen fruitfully.
Yeah.
Okay, great, and
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for audience for staying with us all this time. This is gonna be archived. We got exciting future indie, says Miss Kel. And Jian Palaruan is asking, where can we get these plays? Okay, so what I'll do after this talk is that in the comments thread on this on Facebook. I know you're watching us from YouTube, but if you go to the Warai's website where this video is going to be archived, I'm going to list down how we can access this place, because some of them have been published in anthologies. Yeah. Okay, great. This has been one of our longest panels that we've had.
Thank you, Mas Alfian, for inviting
Thank
me.
you,
Thank
Alfian.
you so much for all this. So Neo
Thank-
Sunin says thanks.
Nice.
Thank you,
To all
everybody
the
here.
panelists and RIs. Yeah, I think we've created a really interesting resource. This is our little virtual library, and let's hope some of those books get loaned out and borrowed by people. Okay, great. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.